Sound the retreat. Hash. Colonel, will you give me permission to set fire to the school building? Said Myshlavsky, beaming at the colonel. No, I will not, Malyshev replied quietly and politely. But sir, said Myshlavsky earnestly, that means that Petliura will get the armory, the weapons, and worst of all, Myshlavsky pointed out into the hallway where the head of Tsar Alexander I could be seen over the landing. Yes, he'll get all that, the colonel politely agreed. You can't mean to let him, sir? Malyshev turned to face Myshlavsky, stared hard at him and said. Lieutenant, in 3 hours' time hundreds of human lives will fall to Petliura, and my only regret is I am unable to prevent their destruction at the cost of my own life, or of yours. Please don't mention portraits, guns or rifles to me again. Sir, said Studzinski, standing at attention in front of the colonel, I wish to apologize on my own behalf and on behalf of those officers whom I incited to an act of disgraceful behavior. I accept your apology, replied the colonel politely. Hash. By the time the morning mist over the town had begun to disperse, the blunt-muzzled mortars on the Alexander High School parade ground had lost their breech blocks, and the rifles and machine guns, dismantled or broken up, had been hidden in the furthermost recesses of the attic. Heaps of ammunition had been thrown into snowdrifts, into pits and into secret crannies in the cellars, while the globes no longer radiated light over the assembly hall and corridors. The white insulated switchboard had been smashed by cadets' bayonets under Myshlavsky's orders. Hash. The reflection in the windows was blue sky. The two last men to leave the school building, Myshlavsky and Karas, stood in the sunlight on the square. Did the colonel warn Alexei that the regiment was going to be disbanded? Myshlavsky asked Karas anxiously. Yes, I'm sure he did. After all, Alexei didn't turn up on parade this morning, so he must have been told, replied Karas. Shall we go and see the turbines? Better not by daylight, as things are. It won't be safe for officers to be seen congregating in groups you never know. Let's go back to our apartment. Blue skies in the windows, white on the playground, and the mist rose and drifted away. 8. Mist. Mist, and needle-sharp frost, claw-like frost flowers. Snow, dark and moonless, then faintly paling with the approach of dawn. In the distance beyond the city, blue onion domes sprinkled with stars of gold leaf, and on its sheer eminence above the city the cross of Saint Vladimir, only extinguished when the dawn crept in across the Moscow bank of the Dnieper. When morning came the lighted cross went out, as the stars went out. But the day did not warm up, instead it showed signs of being damp, with an impenetrable veil suspended low over the whole land of the Ukraine. "10 miles from the city, Colonel Kazire Leshko awoke exactly at daybreak as a thin, sour, vaporous light crept through the dim little window of a peasant shack in the village of Poplyuka. Kazire's awakening coincided with the word advance. At first he thought that he was seeing the word in a very vivid dream and even tried to brush it away with his hand as something chill and threatening. But the word swelled up and crept into the shack along with a crumpled envelope and the repulsive red pimples on the face of an orderly. Kazire pulled a map out of a gridded mica map case and spread it out under the window. He found the village of Borkuni, then Belaya, and from these used his fingernail to trace the route along the maze of roads, their edges dotted with woods like so many flies, leading to a huge black blob, the city. Added to the powerful smell of Kazire's cheap tobacco, the shack reeked of homegrown shag from the owner of the red pimples, who assumed that the war would not be lost if he smoked in the colonel's presence. Faced with the immediate prospect of going into battle, Kazire was thoroughly cheerful. He gave a huge yawn and jingled his complicated harness as he slung the straps over his shoulders. He had slept last night in his greatcoat without even taking off his spurs. A peasant woman sidled in with an earthenware pot of milk. Kazire had never drunk milk before and did not wish to start now. Some children crept up. One of them, the smallest, with a completely bare bottom, crawled along the bench and reached out for Kazire's Mauser, but could not get his hands on it before Kazire had put the pistol into his holster. Before 1914, Kazire had spent all his life as a village schoolmaster. Mobilized into a regiment of dragoons at the outbreak of war, in 1917 he had been commissioned. And now the dawn of December 14, 1918, found Kazire a colonel in Petliura's army, and no one on earth, least of all Kazire himself, could have said how it had happened. It had come about because war was Kazire's true vocation, and his years of teaching school had been nothing more than a protracted and serious mistake. This, of course, is something that happens more often than not in life. A man may be engaged in some occupation for 20 whole years, such as studying Roman law, and then in the 21st year it suddenly transpires that Roman law is a complete waste of time, that he not only doesn't understand it and dislikes it too, but that he is really a born gardener and has an unquenchable love of flowers. This is presumably the result of some imperfection in our social system, which seems to ensure that people frequently only find their proper métier towards the end of their lives. Kazire had found his at the age of 45. Until then he had been a bad teacher, boring and cruel to his pupils. "Right, tell the boys to get out of those shacks and stand to their horses," said Kazire in Ukrainian, and tightened the creaking belt around his stomach. Smoke was beginning to curl up from the chimneys of Popelyuka as Colonel Kazire's cavalry regiment, 400 sabres strong, rode out of the village. An aroma of shag floated above the ranks, Kazire's 15-hand bay stallion prancing nervously ahead of them, whilst strung out for a quarter of a mile behind the regiment creaked the wagons of the baggage train. As soon as they had trotted clear of Popelyuka, a two-color standard was unfurled at the head of the column of horsemen, one yellow strip and one blue strip of bunting tacked to a lance shaft. Kazire could not abide tea and preferred to breakfast on a swig of vodka. He loved imperial vodka, which had been unobtainable for 4 years, but which had reappeared all over the Ukraine under the Hetman's regime. Like a burst of flame, the vodka poured out of Kazire's grey army canteen and through his veins. In the ranks, too, a liquid breakfast was the order of the day, drunk from canteens looted from the stores at Belaya Tserkov. As soon as the vodka began to take effect, an accordion struck up at the head of the column and a falsetto voice started a refrain which was at once taken up by a bass chorus. The trooper carrying the colors whistled and flicked his whip, lances and shaggy black braided fur caps bobbing in time to the song. The snow crunched under 1,000 iron-shod hoofs,